It is a shame with the Social Freedom Tribe. I want to do a video on self-esteem versus ego. Now, ego to me feels more about getting validation and avoiding things that will just give some kind of negative outcome or some kind of feedback that says that that person's less than perfect. I think everybody has some degree of self-esteem and some degree of ego, and I think some people are more in ego and some people are more in self-esteem than others. And to me, ego feels like this dirty high. And so what happens is when we get appreciated, we get some kind of validation, we get this dopamine spike. And dopamine is this happy chemical, this chemical that gives us focus and happiness. And there's a book about this called Staying Focused in a Hyperworld by John Gray. It's a great book, and it basically says that we live in an ADD world because there's so much stuff around us that feeds us dopamine, and we become dependent on high amounts of dopamine stimulation, where we watch TV and there'd be so much stimulation because it's built to stimulate us that we get a ton of dopamine, and we'd kind of train our brains to not be able to find enjoyment through doing tasks and getting into a flow state. The book Flow by Mihai talks about two different types of happiness, one being pleasure and one being enjoyment. Pleasure is this dopamine high, and I think Jamie Wheel's talking a lot about this, where there's these bliss junkies and they're just getting hit with all of this dopamine and other kind of chemicals that they're just, there's a bliss to it. I took this drug, or I ate a bunch of sugar, or I watched a bunch of TV or porn or video games, and I get hit with all this dopamine stimulation. And how this ties back into ego is that when we get appreciated and validated, we also get that dopamine spike. But when we don't have that dopamine spike from validation and from being appreciated or just being shown that we're smarter than everybody or something, then we fall apart because we need that. We're in need of this constant validation. To me, that is ego. When it's contextual, when we feel confident and we feel good in certain contexts where we feel like we're the smartest, or there's just a certain context, to me that is ego. Whereas self-esteem to me is this general confidence, this general feeling good about the self. And it has to do with being able to create enjoyment rather than just always looking for pleasure. And so enjoyment, as Mihai talks about it, is this flow state of finding this optimal challenge level with a task that you're doing that gives you just pure enjoyment. As I said in other videos, there's this way of getting in flow state where if this was being disengaged and bored or just a very low challenge level, and this is a very high challenge level, then there's a way that maybe there's this range where this feels overwhelming and this feels disengaging. When we stay in this optimal range of challenge, we get into a flow state, and then maybe when we get into flow state, the challenge level changes and we can take on more challenge and stuff like that. So when we do that with certain tasks, then we can find enjoyment with it, especially when it comes to our expertise, and we're just finding a lot of enjoyment with this creative energy that we're combining different domains together. We're combining what we've learned with drums with, what we found with board games somehow, or there's just two different domains, maybe speaking and then drumming. Maybe that's a lot easier to connect, where I have a certain rhythm and my drumming experience can come out through my voice, and I kind of understand the tempo and the rhythm that I'm speaking with. There's a way I can get into flow state through that, and there's this creative energy in it of just, the flow state comes from the optimal level of challenge, and the creativeness comes just from combining different domains and finding fascinating results. And that versus being stimulated through television, porn, video games, validation, through other sources, high amounts of sugar. And so, yeah, Jamie Wheal talks about it with like a bliss junkie, where they're just constantly looking for what will stimulate them, what will give them these chemicals in the brain. And so ego to me is where we're in need and constantly needing to feed on high amounts of dopamine just to stay normal. Staying focused in the hyper world by John Gray talks about it as when you watch a bunch of stimulation and TV and stuff like that, your dopamine receptors actually get really not numb but or killed off or something. I forget exactly how he phrased it, but basically we gain a tolerance to dopamine, and we actually need a lot more dopamine to be able to stay happy and focused. Whereas if we cut all those things out and we just have this general kind of focus all the time, because there's nothing that we're using that's just really overstimulating us, and we also are able to relax the body, stay in low stress, and then get into that optimal level of challenge and engagement to get into a flow state to increase enjoyment, then we just feel good in general, and we don't necessarily need this validation to be happy. We're kind of just more in control of this happiness, this enjoyment. And so what ends up happening is that we don't necessarily need to succeed. I'm saying we a lot, as in people that, I guess I'm including myself in people with high self-esteem. It's kind of funny. And so there's this way that, I'll just keep saying there's this way that we can stay in this high self-esteem area by not necessarily staying away from things that will challenge our ego. It's not that, to me, it feels like a fake kind of a faux self-esteem where we're just trying to stay into a context where we feel good about ourselves. Rather than that, it's more of a way of, even while we're doing things where we're sucking at that, there's this humility to it, that, and this way of, I still feel good about myself even if I'm actually sucking at this task. There's a way that I still feel good about myself, and I don't actually need to be the best. I don't really need to be the best speaker. There's YouTube videos where people are way better at speaking and I've seen videos where people are in front of Brooklyn Bridge and from all these different places. I'm in front of my fireplace and a guitar. Cool. And I don't really need to beat everybody in every single area to feel okay and comfortable with putting a video out there. And I just feel good about myself, and I think I have a message, and it's just coming across. I might not be the clearest either, and there's a way that I just kind of feel comfortable bringing it out. I guess I'm using myself as an example, but I'm really just trying to find examples of how we can find ways where we're just comfortable bringing what we have, and we don't necessarily need it to be the best or need to really even be good. But when we feel comfortable being able to do that, we feel humble in sucking at something, but then also feel just generally good with ourselves, even if we suck at something, even if somebody is telling us off and insulting us or something, we still, I'm not going to feel any worse about myself. To me, that's more self-esteem than ego, where ego is more fragile. And there's this, yeah, I'm better than everybody. But as soon as somebody says, you're short, or you're bald, or you suck at ping pong, or something, and that person that was all acting big is now, what? Like this reactive anger or this reactive shutting downness, that to me is more ego, whereas self-esteem is not really needing to be the best or anything, just feeling good about the self. And so I hope that you take this and just start having more of a relaxed sense of self, not really needing all these high expectations on yourself, kind of noticing if you have expectations and then just letting them go and just doing the best you can without needing to be perfect and without needing everything to look the best and be the best, and without really constantly feeding off this dirty high of getting appreciated and getting validated, which I think are great things, and I love hanging out with positive people that appreciate me, and I want people to appreciate me, of course. Of course I want that to happen, but at the same time, there's not a sense of needing it constantly. I think I still need it, but just not constantly every second of every day. And if that's happening for people, I think people should start just being more aware of that and being aware of, are they able to enjoy their lives, or is it more of a dirty high pleasure where it's just constantly looking for making more money, or having more sex, or getting more sugar, or watching more porn, or watching more TV, or playing more video games, or getting more compliments. And if there's a constant look for that, where it's really these base desires that don't really matter, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, I guess money is needed for survival and just for thriving. There's certain advantages. You can travel more, stuff like that. I mean, I guess I would take the money. At the same time, it's like, does it really matter that much to have more money, to have more sex, to have more of these things? It's just, I mean, think about sex. It's just something that happens and then it's just over with. Of course I want sex, and of course I'm a healthy male who wants sex, and I'm going to have more of it, and I'm going to look for more of it. At the same time, it's just, I don't necessarily need it to be happy. I don't know, if I'm not having sex, or if I'm not having sugar, if I'm not watching TV, I'm not necessarily freaking out and feeling terrible about myself. And I think that's more of a need of this ego, dirty high kind of thing, or this bliss junkie or whatever. Anyways, hope you take that to heart. I hope that has some kind of impact or lesson to it, and I hope you take something out of it and just feel better about yourself in general. You have my permission to feel better about yourself and just to feel happy. You have my permission to feel happy. Anyways, love you guys. Have fun. Peace.